Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Whiting, and welcome again to my podcast. Today is a very special edition because I have not only a friend, but a very highly decorated and recognized internist. And his name is Dr. Brian Lenzkas. And I am so thrilled to have him here. And we're going to talk about some things that quite possibly could change your life. Good morning, Doctor.
Hey, Doc, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. Glad you're doing this. This is fun.
Well, I think as we chatted a minute ago, it's very important to get these things out to as many venues as we can. And before we get into the meat of it, I have to tell you that the good doctor has a website, and it's very impressive. And I want you to all go there and click around. It is called lowcarbmd.com, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that later. But I want to start out our discussion today. I've known you for a good many years, and I know that you didn't always embrace this whole low carb concept, but you certainly do now, and you certainly have a whole lot of evidence to show that it's been effective for your patients. What happened? How did the brick hit you on the head?
Well, us Western medicine docs, we are taught one thing going through training, and if our resident says it or our attending physician, who's the boss doc, says this is the way it is, that's the way it is. We don't look on our own. We say, okay, these guys must know better than me, so I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. So being in practice, going back as a kid, I struggled with my weight. In high school, I trimmed down a bit. I was wrestling, playing football, so I would lose a bunch of weight for wrestling, then gain it all back for football because I'm only 5'8" and I'm playing with the big boys. And then I would try to lose it again for a wrestling season. So it was just up and down and up and down. So after high school, I started gaining weight through college, through medical school, through residency, because you shove food down because you never know when you're going to eat again. So you eat a bunch of food, then you have a break into 2 hours, you eat again. And so we all bought into that dogma that you have to eat 5 times a day. If you miss breakfast, you're gonna die. You got to have green shakes for breakfast, and then have a healthy whole wheat bagel, whatever. So all those things, I was gaining weight. I'm working out 6 days a week. I've never been a lazy guy, and we always look at our patients and say they're getting more heavy, they're getting more diabetes. They must not be listening to us. So we're really going to crack down and tell them to do more and more, snack more, eat more, so that you keep your metabolism going. And it wasn't working. So I came. Actually, us docs, if we're smart, we learn from our patients. And I had a guy come in, and he lost 40 pounds. And I said, well, how'd you do it? What'd you do? He goes, oh, you're not going to like it. It's called the fast diet. So basically what he was doing is fasting, eating 600 calories or less on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And I thought, this kind of doesn't make sense, because you fast on Tuesday, then you're going to eat twice as much on Wednesday to make up for it. And he said, no, the weird thing is I'm not hungry. And then so I started looking into this, how can this be? And then I started looking at a guy named Jason Fung, who's become a friend of mine, and he's on our podcast also. And he was talking about intermittent fasting and the benefits. And he's a Western nephrologist, kidney doctor, doing dialysis on people. And he was fed up because he was seeing all these diabetics, and he's thinking, gosh, if we can stop this onslaught, what can we do 20 years before they need dialysis? And so I started looking at his data on insulin resistance and what that means to us as we get obese, and it changed my practice. So I started losing weight. Then all of a sudden my patients are asking me about it. And I said, well, this is off-label because it's not really an accepted diet. If you look at our food pyramid and all this, it's totally contrary. The exact opposite, as a matter of fact, of what they're recommending. So I said, I can't really recommend it, but here's what I'm doing. And then my patients start doing it. They start losing weight, coming off their diabetes medicines. Over the last 2 years, I've had 15 people come off insulin that were on insulin, which was, diabetes. We were told it was a chronic progressive disease. All we could do is minimize the effects. Not true. I think once we have clinical experience, and I think the big thing is you can't unsee what you've seen. And once you see people have clinical success, myself, I'm down 40 pounds from where I was 2 years ago. And you say, well, okay, the standard of care is wrong, but we don't want to stand out in the standard of care. We want to be in the middle of the pack. So there is some degree of medical legal anxiety that us docs get who are understanding this kind of medicine.
Well, and people don't often realize that what a political institution the medical industry is, but it really is. And if you stray from the book too far, and heaven forbid something should go even slightly awry, you're basically hung out to dry by yourself. But it's really great. I think more and more healthcare professionals are going to begin to embrace this. In fact, if you look on your website, you can listen to podcasts from people from all walks of the healthcare industries, MDs, naturopaths, psychiatrists. I mean, it's just it shows that it's growing and growing all the time. And I think that the thing that's really given this thing the boost that it needed was Dr. Fung's two books. Not only are they well written, and not only have they become very popular, but they're very, very scientifically referenced, and that makes the whole thing a bit harder to just simply refute.
Yeah, he was the one who really questioned when I had to question my paradigms. I actually reached out to him, and he was kind enough to call me back. We had a nice conversation. He goes, "Look, Brian, you got to check insulin levels on these people because insulin is our precursor. I say it's your check engine light. If your insulin's really high, there's a problem in your system, meaning that you're taking too many carbohydrates, not exercising. And it's not just that. You're stressed out all the time. You're not sleeping well. You're fighting with your spouse or your partner, or antagonistic with your friends. You don't count your blessings. All the smoking, drinking to excess, all those things double your insulin, raise your insulin level up. So when you raise your insulin, we're finding high insulin levels associated with hypertension. So you're stressed, tense, worried, you spike your insulin. Insulin makes you physiologically hold on to more salt in your kidneys, raising blood pressure, causing problems. So in Western medicine, we say, oh, stay away from salt. That's the problem. Well, guess what? When someone gets their insulin under control, salt's no longer an issue with blood pressure in the vast majority of people. It's the high insulin level combined with high salt that becomes a problem. So when you start really realizing how important lifestyle is, it really changes how you view things. When you see people coming with heartburn, headaches, neck pain, and all those things, the first question I generally have now is, hey, how's life going? Oh, my wife left me. I'm going through a divorce. I got this. When you have all this stuff going on, those stressors are going to cause problems. We know about stress hormones, cortisol, all these things get spiked when we're tense and stressed and hurried all the time, like we are in Western society. So you start realizing, wow, we can really take people off meds if we start reversing these metabolic problems. And that's where Jason Fung was a huge influence on me. Plus, he's a great guy, and he explains it in a way where you say, that makes sense. I mean, how does it make sense if I have a diabetic and their sugar's 300, and I say, well, you got fat, so we're going to put you on a low-fat diet, which has never been shown to work, by the way, or we're going to starve you. The point is, we tell people eat 45 to 60 grams of carbs with each meal. Then we say, we're going to give you insulin to get rid of that sugar. Well, wouldn't it be better just not to have the sugar? The analogy would be if someone's allergic to pecans, I don't say, well, eat pecans with every meal, then we'll give you Benadryl to cover the side effects. You say, stay away from pecans. You have a problem with it. Because most obese people, fat was never the problem. Sugar was the problem. Sugar, and when you look at, there's so much we could talk about for hours, but the big precursor to to diabetes is fatty liver disease. Fatty liver disease doesn't come from eating too much fat. It comes from eating too much carbohydrate, and we store that in our liver as a backup battery. Now, when we're eating every 2 hours because we think we're going to starve to death, we keep filling that battery, that backup battery, full as can be. Now, where I put the extra sugar when it comes in, it has to go to my fat stores, and ultimately what happens is we get type 2 diabetes. Now, that being said, I have 11 people in my practice, mostly men, that weigh less than 160, 165 pounds that look great, that have type 2 diabetes. How can that be if obesity is causing the diabetes epidemic, right? That's when we see it, because people run out of fat storage areas. Now, some ethnic groups, like Southeast Asians, Indian population, they get very insulin resistant even though they're not obese. They'll get diabetes when they weigh 130 pounds. I've seen it before. So it's not just about the obesity. That's one thing we really have to start understanding.
Well, and that's true, because I also see these people who come to us for dietary advice, and what I think what people don't understand is that insulin is really a double-edged hormone. I mean, you can't live without it, but you can't live very well for very long with too much of it either. And it's all a matter of regulating insulin. And unfortunately, medicine for decades has been focused on driving blood sugar down at any and all costs to the patient. And that really is the side effect, because when you normalize insulin, blood sugar almost invariably takes care of itself.
Exactly. And so we see things in practice and we don't understand the physiology. So it happens to me, I'll have a patient lose 40 pounds by dropping their insulin levels, right? When they drop their insulin, then they go to their cardiologist. Cardiologist says, look, we're going to take you off the blood pressure medicines. We're taking off this medicine. It's all because of the weight loss. Well, the weight loss is secondary to low insulin. So I'm arguing with these guys saying, look, it's dropping the insulin that makes the difference. Also, the other thing that's huge to understand is in Western medicine, most of our disease processes are from inflammation. Believe it or not, depression is associated with inflammation in the brain. Anxiety, panic attacks, all those things are associated with inflammation in the brain. If we knock that inflammation down, people feel better. Guess what the two biggest causes of inflammation? Insulin and high sugar levels. Also, high insulin, high sugar levels oxidize LDL from large fluffy LDL into small dense LDL. The small dense LDL is the one that causes the problem. And when your body's making LDL, 80% of our LDL in your body is what your body makes. Why would it be making something to kill you? It just doesn't make sense. Our body's job is to survive. And so why would we be making, well, what's happening is we're making the LDL and then we're putting it in a terrible environment based on our processed foods, sugar, and all this stuff, stress, lifestyle, all that stuff. So it's oxidizing the LDL into something bad that's causing cardiovascular disease. So we know if someone becomes diabetic, their chance of having a heart attack is from 65 to 80% if they don't die of a wound infection or amputation or kidney failure first. So we realize that this is a problem. Now we have to realize, that's why all diabetics need to be on a statin drug by our guidelines, because we know that the more LDL's there, the more it's going to get oxidized because it's in a bad environment. Hopefully that makes sense. And so I say, well, why don't I reverse the diabetes? And then the LDL is not such a problem anymore. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and that's the way to go. I mean, well, what we've been doing with this whole obesity, diabetes issue is we've been treating the side effects and not the cause. And so the cause goes unaddressed, and the patient, as you said, has to just simply learn to live with it, and medicine becomes, the role it plays becomes in maintaining and patchwork and trying to keep them as well off as they possibly can instead of addressing the cause of the problem in the first place.
Exactly. And as you know, when we're dealing with overeating, for instance, one thing that happens is people who are obese have super high insulin levels. If I check it, I have a guy yesterday, I checked it, his insulin level was 49. And a healthy person should be less than 5. Ideally, it's less than 3. When your insulin is high, it makes you hungry all the time, makes you starving, makes you feel like you can't, because insulin blocks your fat metabolism. It blocks you from getting to your fat storage. There's another hormone on the opposite side of the coin called glucagon. And glucagon's role is when your sugars get too low, it starts converting the fat back to sugar to keep your body running. So someone in the fastest, say for me, for example, 2 weeks ago, I came into work and I checked my sugar level in the morning. It was 84. So I said, I'm going to fast overnight, just see what my sugars look like tomorrow. Guess what? Next day, it should be like 20 or something. If I'm fasting, you haven't put any sugar. It was 105. Why did my sugar go up? Because glucagon's doing its job. It says, hey, sugar went a little low. I'm going to kick it up a little bit, give you some, you're not eating sugar. As soon as you start eating sugar, I'll get out of the equation and stop making the sugars go higher. So these are the things we're realizing. And I think the big kicker in the last 6 months or so was the American Diabetes Association reversed themselves. They were fighting the low-carb diet. But what happened is we got these things called continuous glucose monitors. So if I have someone on a low carbohydrate or a ketogenic diet is just an extreme form of low carb, meaning 50 grams of carbs or less. Those people have flat sugar levels. Because if the sugar starts to go low, their glucagon kicks in and spikes it up a little bit. If it goes too high, insulin comes and grabs it and pushes it back down. So it's like we have a thermostat system. And like you said, that's an important point. You can't live without insulin. You can't live with too much insulin. So you want your body to be in a place where it's running evenly. So if my diabetics are on a low-carb diet, their sugars are flat all day long. They don't have to eat 5 times a day. They could eat once a day if they want, and they're keeping their sugars balanced because glucagon will kick in and bring your sugars up. It's a slower reaction, but it does that. Some things interfere with that, like excessive alcohol, excessive stress, things like that will keep your sugars out of it because there's more than those 2 factors, of course. But we're seeing that. Now we take people and put them on a low-carb diet, and then we switch them over to the recommended American Diabetes Association diet, and you see the sugars all over the place, hyperglycemia, low sugars, and you say, well, what would I rather have? I'd rather have flat sugars, right? That's why we told everyone to eat 5 times a day, because we thought that's what it would do. But in fact, every time we're eating carbs, it's spiking our sugars like crazy. Insulin grabs the sugar and then knocks our sugars low. Then we're starving again and panicking. Everyone knows this who's listening, who struggle with weight. And once they start balancing that out, they say, oh, I'm not stress eating, I'm not panicked. And then we're seeing mood get better, anxiety, PTSD, addictions getting better by evening out the diet. And it's really fascinating for me as a practitioner to see that, where people, I have a guy who lost 46 pounds. He now weighs 146 pounds. He dropped his 3-month sugar average from 12.9, which is a death sentence. He's in the 5 range now, which is in the normal range, not even considered diabetic. And blood pressure got better. And he said, yeah, those things are great, but my panic attacks went away and my PTSD went away. That's way more valuable to me. Right? So when people's mood's better and they're stable and they don't need a bunch of drugs to manage their mood, they do better. So these are the things we're seeing, and this is why we're excited about the community growing. We're seeing it. The tide is turning, and so it's really great, because if something works, it works. And if people are doing great, they're going to tell their neighbors, and they don't care what the doctors, and they don't care what the food pyramid says, because they got fat on the food pyramid. One of the points, a recent study, they looked at Americans, and 88% of us are metabolically sick. 88%. Let that sink in. 12% are metabolically healthy. So we make national food guidelines, and by the way, in the food pyramid, it says this is not meant to treat any disease or disorder. It's to keep people healthy. Well, we only have 12% of us now healthy based on what the food pyramid says. And guess what? If we keep doing the food pyramid, there'll be less and less. It'll probably apply to 1% of the population in a few years if we don't get our act together.
Well, I've often said that the standard American diet, with the 4 basic food groups and the food pyramid, has probably indirectly or directly killed more people than all other diseases combined. It's just unbelievable, and how strict and how fanatically the industry clung to that concept through dietetics for years and years, And another thing people don't understand, and you brought that up very nicely, is that almost everything in the human body is a row of dominoes. There's not one domino or one thing, one reaction that takes place in the body that doesn't affect dozens, if not hundreds of others. And that's why, who would have ever thought that excess stress, anxiety, mood swings, even depression might be driven, at least in part, by excess insulin and blood sugar? But it clearly is.
It clearly is. We've always said, we've all said stress is a killer, smoking's a killer. Like, all these things that mess with insulin level are killers, right? Not sleeping is a killer. So being tense all the time, all these things. And so we see it. We say, well, you got to, these people who live, we talk a lot about the blue zones, and they go, oh, these guys live forever. It has to be what they're eating. Well, there's other factors involved. Are they breathing fresh air? Are they in nature? They get a few minutes to meditate or give thanks? Are they involved in a church community where they have support, where people, they're not just texting each other, oh, sorry, your dad died, that kind of thing. We've lost that human connection. We've lost that ability to form a community. And when you have community, we do better. So a lot of these places, like in the Mediterranean, these guys wake up in the morning, they don't have a heck of a lot to do, and they go, hey, my roof's leaking, can you help me? Yeah, sure, no problem, I'll help you. They're like, we'll fish tomorrow. Big deal. So they're not on a tight schedule, rushing around. We have to be here at this time. I got to do this. I got to sacrifice this. I got to make brownies for the PTA meeting. All that stuff where you're super stressed and tense. And so as primaries, we see it. If you're stressed all the time, guess what? You're going to have stomach problems. You're going to have bowel problems. You're going to have headaches. You're going to have neck pain. You're not going to sleep well. And all those things start snowballing. If you're not sleeping well, then you get more stress. You get more stress, you eat more garbage food. Then you eat more garbage food, you get more hungry for those foods. So understanding that this is a food and sugar addiction is key. I'll give one plug on our Low Carb MD podcast, episode number 10 with Rob Sivas. Completely changed my view of food, nutrition, snacking, food addiction. And it's powerful. I mean, he's powerful. And he's a gastric bypass surgeon who's helping people not to get surgery. He's hurting his own bottom line by saying, hey, look, surgery's not – because, like you said, root cause. If we don't fix the root cause of why you're 500 pounds, guess what? You're going to gain the weight back. You got to get this figured out of why am I turning to food when I'm stressed. And I'll just tell you one other thing that's very interesting to me that I never really thought about is in talking with him as a gastric bypass surgeon. At just doing the standard of care gastric bypass or sleeve or all these kind of things. Okay, at 5 years, the divorce rate, 90%. porn addiction goes up, alcohol addiction goes up, smoking goes up, suicide goes up. All these things go up. Like, when you think after gastric bypass you finally have hope that you're going to have a normal life and things would get better, but people get worse. Why? Because, like Dr. Seifert says, hey, when I do surgery on you, I'm killing your best friend. Because your best friend is those cookies that when you're stressed out, or that ice cream at night. Because you can't do it anymore because your stomach's gone, right? Now what are you going to do? Now you're going to turn to smoking, drinking, cheating on your spouse, whatever it is that gives you that dopamine rush. And once you start realizing the addiction aspects of processed food, and there's people, you know, that are hired just to make chips more addicting so that people can't stop and they keep eating them. And so and also along those lines, just to finish the thought, is a recent study came out with binge eating, and they said 100% of the time, and no one in science ever says that. In medicine, we never say 100% of the time. They said in their survey, 100% of the time, people binged on processed foods. So people don't go home and say, oh, that's it, I had a hard day, I'm going to eat broccoli all night. You know, people don't do that. You don't eat steak until you throw up. You eat enough steak, you sound full. But chips, crackers, popcorn, when you go to the movies, we could eat a whole tub of popcorn, which would be equivalent to eating 3 steaks, and you want to go fill it up again. Because especially when you're drinking with a soda that makes you more hungry. So, you know, once we start learning that, when people change their lifestyle, their diet, they crush it. They do absolutely fantastic because they take off the chains of addiction, and now they can function like a normal person.
I know it's so rewarding, and you wonder why the industry has fought it for so long, especially because virtually every single person, with few exceptions, who follows this type of program ends up healthier and happier at 40 different levels because it's all interconnected. Well, speaking of your website, why don't you tell all of us a little bit more about it, and what was your impetus for starting it?
Well, it's funny. I have 2 different websites. One is that it's kind of a funny story in a way, and a sad story too. When I was starting this stuff, I said, man, I really want to get the word out, but, you know, I'm going to practice with other partners who are Western docs. So I said, well, I can't be really talking to low carb because it puts them at risk because I'm talking about something outside the standard of care. So I said, look, I want to start my own little thing on the side that I'm doing where I can talk to people and help them with lifestyle, what's important, right? Because when you're in the medical system as a doc, I might have 15 minutes to spend with you. It's really hard to talk about all the stuff that we're going to talk about at this time, right? So it's hard to get all this information to people. So I started that website, and it was called lowcarbmd.com. And my buddy, who's an attorney, said, you know what, Brian, not good. Do not put the MD on there. It's risky. People are going to think it's medical advice, blah, blah, blah. So I said, okay, I won't. He said, I can't sleep at night. It's stressing me out. So I said, what should I change it? And we talked about it. I said, well, let's just call it Low Carb Advisor. So I'll give you low carb. So I have lowcarbadvisor.com where I do consults and help people to get on the track and understand what we're talking about. Because the problem is, when people say I'm doing low carb, their doctor says, "Oh my God, that's going to blow up your heart. You're going to." They don't know the data. They don't know the evidence. Obviously, I wouldn't be doing something to myself that to lose 20 pounds so I have a heart attack. That's ridiculously stupid, right? So when you look at the science, you understand. Oh my gosh, there's a lot of valid science, and people from all over. I have 5 cardiologists that I know that are doing low carb and having unbelievable success with patients reversing their coronary disease, reversing their heart failure, and it's incredible. We have them on the podcast. So about a year later, he called me. He was like, "Hey, Brian, how you doing?" Good. We went to high school together, and he said, "Hey, by the way, I lost 60 pounds doing low carb. You could call it low carb MD. I think it's legit now, right?" So my attorney, who's he's lost weight, his whole family's healthier, everyone's doing great. He's like, "This is great. How can people not know about this?" So we're starting a podcast. I really wanted to get the word out because. For me, I didn't really have a platform. I was just doing my thing, and I'll quietly do it. And at that point, the environment was very unhealthy because Professor Tim Noakes, who was talked about carb loading since the 70s, reversed himself and said, "Hey, this is bad. We got to stop carb loading. I got diabetes. My dad died of diabetes complications." When he reversed himself, the establishment went after him. So he spent 3 years in trials and had to prove his case. Another friend of mine now, Dr. Gary Fedke, orthopedic surgeon, got tired of amputating people's feet because of diabetes complications, said, "Hey, let me talk to these people about nutrition." And he got sued by the nutritionist who said, "Hey, this is outside your scope of practice. You're a surgeon. You can't be talking nutrition to people." So his charge was inappropriately reversing diabetes. What the heck does that mean? Our number 1 killer in the world, it's inappropriately reversing it, and that's a problem. So he fought it and won. And another doctor friend of mine in Canada, same thing, had to fight the establishment and say, look, here's my data, here's my clinical evidence, here's what I'm doing with my patients, here's my results. And no one could argue with it. Even though it's outside of what they call the standard of care, now the standard of care is changing. So early on, I said, we have to change the standard of care. How do we do that? The standard of care, whether right or wrong, is what the majority of the doctors in your area of expertise are doing. So if everyone's killing people and you kill people, then you're within the standard of care, unfortunately. So when you say, look, the standard of care is not working, the only way to change it is to have enough people practicing that kind of medicine where that becomes the new standard of care. And now the old guys are outside the standard of care. So what's happening now is we gave doctors a platform and patients a platform. We really wanted to reach people who've given up. The person I do the podcast with, obviously Jason Fung, who you know, he's an awesome guy. He's really helped me a lot and been a mentor. He's part of our podcast. And then Tro Kalajian and Megan Ramos is with IDM, which was intermittent fasting with Jason Fung. But Tro Kalajian, he caught my eye on Twitter because this guy's he used to be 350 pounds. He's the guy who couldn't go on the airplane. He had to have a seat extender. So he knows what it's like to be obese. He knows what it's like to struggle. You know, I've always been overweight, but never to that extent. So I said, wow, man, this guy's awesome, because the thing that really made me want him was he was writing on Twitter about how once you're obese, it's hard to get out of that mindset. He has a 32-inch waist now. He's running on the treadmill. He's a marathon runner. And these guys behind him go, my gosh, look at that fat guy. How embarrassing. Why is he even at the gym? He's never going to get anywhere. And he thinks they're talking about him. So he feels shame and guilt and all this stuff. And then he realized, oh, they're not talking about me. They're talking about someone else. You know, and so when I saw that heart where you get it, and he's upset with the system, so he gets in people's face. He's a New Yorker. He's going to tell them how it is. And I'm more even-keeled, right? So us two together is a lot of fun. So that's how we started. And then we started realizing doctor after doctor from all over the world. I mean, if you look, we have 50 episodes now. We just released number 40, and we have 5 more ready to release. And these are all doctors. These are all people that were 575 pounds. Now they turned their life around. They took control. So I think the more the word gets out and people are doing well, it's awesome. It's really, I was just at a medical conference and tons of people are coming, hey, you Dr. Lenzkas, oh my gosh, give me a hug. I'm so happy to meet you. Thank you. I lost 38 pounds. I lost 42 pounds. I'm off my insulin. I'm off this. And you're like, wow, it's overwhelming when you see it all in one place. And so that's why we do it. You know, we self-funded it too. We have no financial interest. We have had people reach out to support. We're totally supported by Patreon supporters who've been benefited by the podcast. So I don't say, well, buy this product because you're paying me money on this side. You have to maintain your integrity, right? Now, I don't have a problem if you believe in your products and you're selling them, and that's great. That's totally right. But I don't want to say I recommend this guy's book even though he's a jerk and his stuff doesn't work because I make $2 every time he sells a book. You see what I'm saying? There's a conflict of interest. So that's kind of where we're at. And so it's just been a lot of fun and seeing doctor after doctor reach out to us, hey, I want to come on, I want to come on. So it made people say, hey, it's okay to practice this kind of medicine, that you're helping people, because we're all seeing benefits. The problem is the establishment says, oh, that's anecdotal. That's just an anecdotal story. It doesn't mean anything because it wasn't a randomized controlled trial. But guess what? My patient who lost 80 pounds, reversed their diabetes, they're off all their blood pressure meds. Now they can play soccer with their kids in the backyard. That's a life to me. It's not an anecdote. And that's kind of what we're saying. Is like, look, these are all individual people. I have nothing to gain if it was veganism or whatever it is. I don't make any more money if you do a certain diet. I don't make money if you intermittent fast, right? It doesn't matter. It's just saying, hey, here's what's working for my patients. And if something works for you that sitting down with Jason Fung was fun because I said, hey, Jason, what do you tell people who don't like to fast? I said, well, tell them not to fast. Right? If they like fasting, fast. If you like to cut your carbs, cut your carbs. If you like to do this, do it. If you're vegan and it works for you, good, it works for you. I'm not going to convert you to my religion if yours is working. So that's kind of the point, is saying, hey, what works for you as that individual in front of me? Because some people want someone to yell at them and jump up and down and scream. And in a boot camp, other people want someone who's going to give them a hug and support them, right? So we all have our own different personalities. And I think the big thing is realizing which type of person you are and what you need to succeed. And what your inner drive is, your motivation for getting healthier, right? If you want to play with your grandkids, or you say, hey, I want to fit in my dress when I go to that party in 6 months from now. And realizing this isn't just a temporary lose your weight quick and then go back to what you were doing. You have to change your lifestyle. That's the whole key.
That's it, one way or another, because the standard American lifestyle is killing us far before our time, and in a much more devastating sort of way when the body begins to break down internally. Well, this has been absolutely fantastic. I know that my thousands of listeners are going to find this interview really interesting. And in closing, I'd like to remind everyone, if you are interested in this subject and you're interested in hearing from dozens and dozens of healthcare professionals, uh, not alternative medicine professionals, but mainstream for the most part, and their experiences, which have all been very similar to what we've been talking about today, just simply go to lowcarbmd.com and you'll get your fill. And listen, learn, and heed the warnings that you're being taught. Doctor, I want to thank you so much for taking out the time in your busy schedule to spend some time with my listeners. And perhaps we'll do this again sometime, and perhaps I'll hook up with Dr. Fung and get his intermittent fasting approach.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks for the work you're doing and getting people healthy and helping them out. Having that support, and so I definitely love it. I love what you're doing. The more of us get out there, we're the ones who are going to save the healthcare people. Our healthcare system that's crumbling. It's curing disease, helping disease. Without drugs, without surgical interventions. If we can prevent these things, it's really critical. So I applaud what you're doing, and thank you for giving me a platform to talk for a little while.
Oh, well, it's been my pleasure. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.